Hello, Internet! Shalthis here, and it is time for another episode of the Engram here on gkick.net, on iTunes, and of course, on YouTube. You can find us at youtube.com/shoutstoneshow. The old channel is being repurposed, as it were, for this show and whatever else I may put up there. But in any event, so welcome to the Engram. You might be able to tell, I don't know, I'm a little bit sick. I have come down with some sort of cold, so I wanted to do the podcast before it got so bad that I couldn't speak, because there was some stuff to talk about. And I did have one thing in particular that I wanted to get into, but anyway. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the news. So, this episode might be out at the same time that Destiny is down right now, because they are implementing a new hotfix. And the new hotfix is really mostly back-end stuff to try and improve the stability, to try to reduce the getting booted to orbit issues that I've been having, or the kick to orbit issues. So that's been a big part of trying to get it fixed. There was also some kind of issue in PvP with certain weapons being able to quickscope that I guess weren't supposed to be that way. So they're fixing that, and that's really been the gist of it. So that's one of the biggest things, is just a lot of back-end client-level fixes. Additionally, the end of the Queen's Wrath event has happened, so I hope you got your fill of that, because it is done. Hope you got your rewards while you could. Now begins the Iron Banner event. Now, for those of you who don't PvP, this probably won't mean much to you. For those of you who do PvP, then Iron Banner is going to be pretty exciting. So, what Iron Banner is, just to make sure I state it clearly. If you've done PvP in Destiny so far, then you know that it will generally level the playing field in the Crucible and everything like that, so that you don't have to rely so much on the gear you have, just your own skill in PvP to succeed. Which is it's a really nice touch for people who are, maybe you don't have that great gear, but you really enjoy PvP. So Destiny does a good job at that. Iron Banner, however, does not take that into account. What Iron Banner does is it lets your gear be one of the deciding factors. So not only is your skill in PvP on the line, but also your gear. Now, I know what the initial line of thought is basically, well, what chance do I stand against 28, 29s, 30s who are in this? And odds are you really don't. Well, you still might. It depends on if they're terrible at PvP. I mean, I could tell you from personal experience, there's a lot of people who play these types of games that are great at PvE, but terrible at PvP. So, you might still stand a chance. But, yeah, so the Iron Banner event begins. There are new rewards. Of course, the Iron Banner vendor is going to be in the same spot the Queen's Wrath vendor was, which is if you go up the stairs past the bounty, the bounty board in the tower, and straight back, you'll find him back there. So that's what's going on now, and we're just waiting for the game to come back online, at least as of recording. I don't know if it's going to be back up by the time this episode posts, but we'll see. So, before I continue, I did get another question from Gilbert Ghostfried, who had a few questions about, well, he really wanted to know about factions. So let's take a listen, shall we?
So I'm looking at all these factions, and I want to play one, but how come I can't dress up like one, or get a fancy ship, or a fancy car that makes me scream, I'm a part of this faction? What's the deal with that?
Alright, well, thank you very much, Gilbert. So the sentiment I hear from Gilbert is the same as I've heard from a lot of other players, and that's a little more variety and a little more of a need to want to reflect that you're a part of a particular faction. Now, so for those of you who aren't familiar, there's basically 4 factions in Destiny. There is the default, which is the Vanguard, which is what you earn rep through by doing bounties and things like that. There is the Future War Cult, the Dead Orbit, and New Monarchy. And you earn reputation through them by doing a couple things. Now, if you want to champion a particular faction, you have to go to that faction and purchase a class-specific item for about 2,500 glimmer that you equip. So for warlocks, of course, it's the the bind, cloaks for hunters, and the other thing for titans. Either way, the point being is you have to purchase this aesthetic item to then apply all of your reputation gains toward that faction, which means instead of doing bounties for Vanguard faction, you will instead be doing them for the other faction. Now the catch is, with all of these other factions, you have to do Crucible to earn marks to get many of the rewards. You also earn, of course, reputation gains through them as well. But anyway, one of the things that I hear a lot is people want to see a few particular things that allow you to not only champion a faction, but demonstrate that you are a part of that faction. And those things are basically shaders specific to the faction, ships, sparrows, something that is aesthetic, but that allows you to really stand out as being a part of that faction. And I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something that Bungie really needs to look at for any new faction that they introduce to the game. And they did that with the Queen's Wrath event. They offered a couple different shaders through her, but I think they should continue that with the ships and vehicles and stuff like that. Just different little aesthetic changes that demonstrate that you are a champion of that faction. So I would say, you'd probably earn those rewards around, level 2 or 3 with that particular faction, just to show that you've clearly put in the effort with those factions. So that's my thought, at least. And I think it would be a pretty wise idea to really make factioning an important and a more fun process to really be able to champion factions that way. I'm also curious if they're ever going to introduce anything more in the way of non-combat aesthetic type features. I know that cloaks are a big thing for hunters, but that could be an aesthetic feature that doesn't require a new armor slot necessarily, but could allow for a little bit of extra flavor to different characters. Because they're at a point right now where most characters are going to look very similar when they're around level 29 and 30, especially if they're level 30, because at the point right now there's only one raid, and the only way to get to level 30 is through raid gear, and you can only get raid gear through the Vault of Glass. So, you see what I mean. And obviously that'll change as more and more raids are added and things like that. But I'd like to see a little more in the way of different aesthetic options to really personalize the characters a bit more. A bunch of new shaders would be a great option. Maybe other aesthetic armor pieces could be nice. Maybe even someday introduce the ability to transmogrify, which if you're not familiar with that, that's a feature that's in World of Warcraft where basically you can take a piece of armor and make it look like another piece of armor that you own. And I know that the armor variances aren't too significant in Destiny at the moment, but maybe you like the look of something or the color of something better than something else. Or at least the look, because the shaders kind of impact the color. But, well, that's just my thought, something I'm entertaining. But anyway, I'd like to hear what you guys think. What would you like to see added to Destiny from an aesthetic standpoint? I know there's a lot of stuff a lot of us like to see added to the game, but think about the aesthetic standpoint, or maybe even faction change standpoint. What would you like to see? Just let me know in the comments below. On YouTube, you can of course hit me up on Twitter at gkickshalthis, and the link to Facebook is in the description below. It's also on gkick.net in every post when this podcast goes live. So, that is it. Well, I will see you folks next time. Enjoy your game, hopefully when it comes back up. And, happy hunting. Farewell, Guardians.